with that said, Pradeep, why don't you start telling us your most interesting story about personal failure as a tester?
First of all, my prayers and my wishes for everybody to be safe, um, and let's hope that the situation certainly gets better. And as a disclaimer, there are my pet birds in the background, so you might hear some quick sounds. So that's just normal. It's not me trying to mimic anything. And the third thing you talked about, the personal testing failure. Is that what
Failure
you're
story as a tester, yeah.
saying? So my failure as a tester came about because I was passionate. Passion can, for me, um, anything that's good, when it overbleeds, it turns into bad. It turns into negative. It turns into a very bad thing. Um, so for me, my passion was my strength, and when it started overflowing, it turned into a negative. And let me start with something really funny. When I met my wife, for the first time, where she was not yet decided to be my wife or anything like that. In the first meeting, I take her out and I speak about testing for about 2.5 hours, and and then I thought I had impressed her. I thought, like, wow, look at it, Pradeep. You are now able to squeeze your awesome passion and all those things that you've learned and the skills. And then at the end of the 2.5 hours, I asked her, "What do you think about me now that I've spoken about who I am?" And then she said, two words, that, or maybe three, that you are boring. Right. So that's my personal failure with testing, that I could just not give a great first date to my wife. Um, and there can't be a bigger failure than this. Uh, so we're still married, and that shows that, um, you know. So I didn't actually speak to her for the next 2 weeks, and then and then she called me and said, "Why didn't you call me?" And I said, "But I thought you said I'm boring." And then she said, "Yeah, you're boring, but I didn't say that I don't like you." Well, I was like, wow. Right. So that's what it is. And I made her a promise that I won't discuss testing after that. And it's been 12 years, and I've not discussed testing with her.
Good. So that was probably your first lesson, that testers should not assume things.
Oh, absolutely. Much more than that. Yeah, very expensive.
Well, it's very expensive, isn't it? Well, thank you so much, Pradeep. That was interesting to know. I have a question. Before that, I would like to congratulate you and also thank you for writing your very insightful book, Buddha in Testing. Uh, I would love to hear what failures you experienced that have contributed for making this book happen.
Um, Again, it goes back to the passion and the learning. I was learning actively. The more I learned, the more frustrated I became.
Hmm.
I would see my colleagues sitting and executing test cases, being very happy in life, and very happy that all the test cases are passing. And here I was very sad that all the test cases were passing, even for him. So it kind of frustrated me so much that I would go challenge, resist, and all of that stuff, right? So the learning was not helping me be calm, be peaceful. We all say, okay, everybody has to learn. You have to be a continuous learner. But Lalit, even the more you're learning, the more you're becoming aware. You see that the world is broken. The world is broken. The world
Yeah.
is broken. Now for me, that made this whole space look very depressive for me. Like I was like frustrated that, oh my god, if the world is so broken, me alone can't fix this. We need the whole of community to come and fix this. But bringing people together is another problem in itself. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, this frustration led me. Now, a lot of people deal with frustration in very different ways. For me,
Mm-hmm.
the way I dealt with, given that I was in my late, 20s, my blood was boiling super high. You can imagine, I mean, if you're a North Indian, you can imagine me to be a Sunil Shetty. If you're a South Indian, you can imagine me to be a Sai Kumar. And that's how I behaved. And that behavior does not go well in the corporate world. So obviously I was fired. I was forget being fired. I was frustrated. I was more happy being fired. And that's essentially what happened to me. Again, the source of it is passion and learning. So we all think that by being passionate and by being a continuous learner, we can solve problems. No, 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 no. We'll just see more problems, and it can make us more frustrated. So that is what led me to, and then the journey that I took after that is what led me to write this book, Buddha in Testing, where I realized that there are so many people out there who might be going through what I'm going through, and they need to find the peace. And most of the testing books talk about testing techniques and approaches, but it leaves out the human factor. It leaves out the tester factor. That what frustration is the tester going through? So those are the failures, and that's the journey that led me to write that book.
Excellent. I think reading this people will certainly help people, but for those who haven't read it, I would like you to tell us. So, how do you manage to be Buddha in testing? Like when you see everything around you is so broken, things are on fire, and they are not really in sync. And being someone who has higher sensitivity for all these things, how do you manage to stay calm and look at things in a uh, uh, I don't know the English word for that, but like from third person point of view, like an observant, silent observer. How do you go about that?
12 years into marriage, having a child, you know. Um, so I should say I should certainly give a lot of credit to my wife. She helped me understand a lot of things that I mean, I should say that I was aggressive. I was passionate. I was skilled. All of those things checked, except that I did not understand people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the lesson that I've learned from my wife. And um, you talked about how am I staying calm. I would not stay calm. And Lalit, including you know it really very well about how I would not stay calm. So I think the staying calm happened when I was moved to the point where I lost almost everything that I thought was mine in my professional life. And at that point, I went on a spiritual journey, not a religious journey, but a spiritual journey, to discover that there is something called the people science and the human science.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be the one that has to be fused with the technical science that we are dealing with at work. When I was able to do that, I I was able to be calm. But till that point, my frustration, my whole health, the way that I dealt with things was just horrible.
I have another question for you on this one. I often experience that whenever I notice it with myself. I have experienced this with many other testers who come to me for mentorship also. There are lots of passionate people, but at the same time, they fail, including myself, not to feel responsible for what they are letting go of. How would you, or what would you suggest people to not feel responsible for things they cannot control as a tester? Like some practical tips, like do this, count up to 10, or bang your head on the wall, whatever, what works best.
I would ask them to go through the phase of feeling bad for not being in control.
Mm-hmm.
The repeated failure is important.
Mm-hmm.
So since we're talking about failures, right?
Mm-hmm.
One failure, we don't necessarily learn from just one failure.
Okay.
Sometimes we need a series of failures. Sometimes we need to run out of options to be
Mm-hmm.
able to think about, okay, I've exhausted all my options. What's the way for me now to do, and what's the new way for me to do, okay, things. And I want to also bring this out. Most of the things that people need in order for them to be detached, or be aware that they are not in control of things, is already available on the internet. And all of us know of plenty of quotes that we have no clue how to follow, right? In terms of our practical ability, our what's it, emotions take over, our biases what's it take over. So for me, what I've understood is that it's sometimes important for people to go through these repeated failures, because not everybody has the similar journey or a tipping point with just one failure that they experience. So when today, for my daughter, the way that we are helping her learn is by trying to help her see that there is failure. Like typically, for example, whenever a kid does a drawing and shows it to parents, the parents say, wow, you did a great job. Here in our house, we are telling her it's not good if it's not good. So that way, right at the early stage, she is getting closer to understanding that there is something that she's failing at. And yes, she gets frustrated, but she also asks about, what do I do then to do really good? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where the learning begins. But the
Mm-hmm.
first few times she didn't bother to ask. She said like, oh, you might be wrong, and she just went off. And that's natural human behavior.
Now that we are talking about mental and psychological aspects of this, do you think how testers recognize their job to be as a tester, or let's say quality assurance, has some kind of contribution to this feeling of feeling responsible and then naturally feeling out of control because they cannot really assure quality which they feel they are supposed to?
It's not just with the QA or the testing or automation, is what I've seen, is that as humans, we largely identify ourselves with our work. So
Mm-hmm.
when we give feedback about work, people take it very personally because they are not able to separate themselves from their work.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a problem across human race, and not just not just the testers, but testers, with the little understanding that I have, the majority of the culture of the company, they give a perception that somebody in the QA is responsible for quality. Um, it took me so many years to understand that it's not just the QA or even the developer, just one developer to be responsible for quality. The entire team and the entire company has to come together to be responsible, for it. But if the culture is like that, a fresh tester coming into that culture continues to think that, oh my god, this is what the role of a tester is, that I have to own up, what's equality, and that's the problem. And that if these cultures change, then I think it can help. But the reason why those cultures are not changing is because there is no big catastrophic failures that these organizations are not going through. Like for
Mhm.
instance, Nokia was like the phone. Most of us had Nokia phone. Today, I don't see anybody in my whole of the society to be using a Nokia phone. And now that catastrophic event has become a case study for a lot of people. Now, even before that catastrophic event, there were like smaller failures within what's in Nokia, but Nokia did not understand it. Nokia, the best of the people of Nokia who built the best of the phone, did not bother to acknowledge the failure. So sometimes, it's about a culture change. Sometimes it's about a catastrophic event. It's not even just a failure; it's a series of failures. It's a catastrophe.
True. Nokia and a Nokia and see what happened that. I will ask you another question, Pradeep. So, in my experience, testing is usually at the receiving end when business decides to save costs. As a businessman who sells testing, what are your lessons you have learned whenever you had to face the situation where business was cutting cost on the testing?
Oh, okay. That's a very good question. Um, so one of our largest customer once decided that they don't need testers anymore, and they dropped me an email saying, this is the decision that we have taken as a culture. We want to get rid of what's it, testers doing testing, and and I welcomed it, and I said, look, I have read about this. Um, okay, I've read about this and I want to experience it. If you, as a company, show to me how things can move at what's say smoothly, when you have had testers and you just let them go, that will also help me learn. Maybe if that's the way to do things, then even all of us have to pivot and do something else in life, right? So for
Mhm.
me, when it happened about 5 years ago, I welcomed it. 15 years ago, I would have challenged it. I would have um, created all sorts of chaos about the decision that's being made and all of that sort. So that's essentially how I dealt with it. Unfortunately, it that was not a failure. It turned out to be a success. So that's the
So
bad.
you saw an opportunity in a failure that sounded like a failure, but it turned up as an opportunity for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and in this juncture, I want to recommend a book to people, which has largely helped me. It's a book by Ryan Holiday. The book is called The Obstacle, and the art of turning obstacles to an advantage. Um, it's a very good book about how to face failure and translate that to an advantage. So that's one book I want to recommend to folks. Although,
Excellent. Thank you. My next question for you, Pradeep. Do you think there is general lack of great leadership? I mean, the corporate one in testing field, and why is that? If yes,
yeah, speaking about failures in the testing space, there are thought leaders. We have exceptional thought leaders.
yeah.
We don't have business leaders in testing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, the the large companies, they have focus on revenue. They don't have focus on testing. Although testing is their business, right? Let me clarify this. Making money out of testing is their business, but testing is not their business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we have not seen great industry leaders, business leaders from the testing space. That's also because the number of hands-on testers who want to get into a business role has also been very, very limited. Very
Mhm.
limited. I can hand count the total number of testers that I know who have turned into entrepreneurs and who have been able to grow it to a certain point. I think when the world sees a lot more of it, we will be in a position to not be in this state. But right now, there is a huge deficit of leadership in testing, and be it Moolya or anywhere else. I think we as a community need to build leaders because what I've seen is that the people who just get into testing, they all look up to these leaders. If they are misguided, then these fresh ones are misguided
Please,
too.
please, 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 please hold on to your thought because my next question is right on that one, Pradeep. I have seen passionate testers changing their ideologies as they climb up the corporate ladder. An example, from taking firm stand for craft of testing, which actually helps them grow in their career. Once they reach certain level, I have experienced people changing their sides, and then they suddenly start talking about uh, engineering aspect of testing or focusing a lot more on automation and things like that. And I feel this is where testers who look at these people as role models, they feel betrayed. Why this betrayal with the profession happens, Pradeep, and how can we stop this?
Okay, if I knew all the solutions, I would have solved the problem, and you would have not had to ask this question. So, okay, uh, so people do change, and we have to
Mhm.
accept it. That's the
Okay.
best way. When we resist change, we are actually resisting reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I've understood is that we have to let people change, and probably they're changing. Rather than using the word changing, they are what's say adapting to a
Mm-hmm.
certain need that they see is there, for them to succeed. Now, um, their change, if it's not aiding the community, well, we always are going to lose out a few people, right? But uh, have they left a body of work that inspires more people, or because they crossed their sites, are they making friends on the other side and bringing them over to the other sites? Much better. Are they removing the view of sides and bringing the world together, making the world inclusive, and not making it look like two sides or there is multiple sides and all of that stuff, right? So this is essentially what the world needs. Now I see there are some people working towards it, but but on the flip side, humans being humans, biases run in the blood, and sometimes people find it very difficult to overcome their biases, and sometimes people are okay to overcome the biases. So that's essentially what my
Okay, thank you so much. That's very insightful. I will ask you another question that probably I think you are most qualified to answer. You have always fought for good testing, driving change to the extent that you got fired for taking a firm stand about testing and fighting for the craft. Did you learn something from your fights that now you can share with us so that people can still fight for the change without having the position of power?
Yeah, a series of good questions. Thank you. So first, I would not recommend anyone to do what I've done.
Okay.
Um, Being a rebel has its flip sides.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it makes you lose friends,
Mm-hmm.
It makes you lose a lot of friends, gain very few friends, and you don't know if they are friends too, because if right. So
Yeah.
so so first, I don't recommend anybody to do what I've done. The second thing is that um, you know uh, the true power is in letting things happen and waiting for the right opportunity to be able to help people succeed. Now, what I used to do is to prevent people from failing, and that's the reason why I was seen as not a good person. It's because I would prevent bad things from happening where people don't even know that it's a bad thing. So they can't even relate to what I'm thinking in my mind. And I think now I let things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And in like in my company, there was somebody who wanted to make a decision. I absolutely knew that it's not going to yield anything. I just let them do it. 6 months later, they came back to me and said it didn't work, and I asked them, "Do you want to make it work?" And that's when I have to speak. So knowing when to speak is power.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking before the need is aggression.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I wish we could discuss that more in detail, but I will now move on to next question. So, Pradeep, yesterday in panel discussion with James and Michael Bolton, and we had Anna and Prajita, James said one interesting thing that stuck with me, and he said that we testers, or we as a testing industry, have failed to articulate testing and communicate the value of testing. Why do you think that happens, and what would you suggest testers to change that?
We have failed to articulate, testing. Uh-huh. Mhm. I have to disagree with James.
Mm-hmm.
I have to
Mm-hmm.
disagree with James. I think I think we have articulated, but we have articulated in a way we testers understand and appreciate, and
Okay.
we have to simplify the articulation
Mm-hmm.
for the business leaders and product leaders to understand about testing, if we want them to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, as I've also written in the book, right? Testing is a feedback loop. It's
Mm-hmm.
very simple. It's a feedback loop. Okay, anybody building any system needs a feedback loop. Testing is a feedback loop. All teams within the marketing team needs feedback loop. The product team needs feedback loop. The sales team needs feedback loop. What's all of this? And most of the startups that we're working with, who are at their early stages, they all talk about testing their product in the market, because they don't they don't have a product market fit yet. So people do understand that it's a feedback loop. Now, what we have not been able to articulate, probably that's also what James meant, is that we have not been able to articulate that it is an intellectual process to test, and it's not a set of deterministic checks. This thing we have absolutely failed to articulate, probably because the way testing was happening, and the bias that is built up for over decades. Now, please, I mean, like, no humans, no community can change what has been happening for several decades in just a few years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We need a decade, and I think we are in the middle of the decade to bring these kind of what's the changes. It's just like how COVID made companies understand that remote work can still move their company and grow their company. We need a catastrophic event in the software testing space for people to understand that it is an intellectual process and there are ways that we have to do it. Till that catastrophic event, there will be a large population of people who will not understand that testing is an intellectual activity, and all I can do is wait, and I have nothing else to do, and I can just wait and meditate and be calm and be cool.
I so feel you, Pradeep. I could not wait, and I at least did my part. I wrote a Twitter thread talking about the same things. But yes, I think I agree with you. We need this shock therapy somewhere that will people feel suddenly shaken and that will open their minds.
Yeah.
That leads me my another question, maybe last from me. Is it possible to succeed as a leader in testing without getting fired for, taking stand for good testing?
Not by me. Not by me, but yeah, certainly for others. Certainly for others, there are a lot of good leaders that I have come across, and you heard Anuj talk.
Yes.
What a fabulous leader Anuj will be. If I was not doing what I was doing, I would have certainly loved to report to Anuj.
Me too.
So there are good leaders, great leaders like him, uh, um, and I think it is possible to do that, okay, without getting fired. So it's just that each of us have certain background and certain energy that we carry, and
Mhm,
we have to acknowledge and understand who we are. Um,
mhm,
each of us have different backgrounds, and knowing what our background is will help us understand, do we need to go the fire way or do we need to go the non-fire way. So
mhm,
that's what I would say. But I would also say this, that in my understanding over the last 5 years, I think it's about building partnership. If
mhm,
if let's say Anuj and I were working together as peers, he would be able to handle certain things that I can't, and I would be able to handle certain things that he can't. So if we forge these partnerships in our teams, in our companies that we are working with or farming, it is absolutely possible for people to succeed without getting fired, and without also getting others fired, and without also firing others. So that's what I would.
That's such an excellent thought process, Pradeep. I admire you for that.
Thank you.
I have asked everything that I had in mind for you. Let's quickly go to Q&A. We are a little bit over time, but I think the next session is still about open space. So if you don't mind, I would like to continue a bit.
Yeah.
Let's see the most upvoted. Oh, Rahul is asking, can we see Moolya offering remote roles post-COVID?
Absolutely. Okay, no doubt about it. And uh, we are looking to do some interesting reinvention post COVID, and but yes, there will be a lot of remote work,
Interesting.
and that is true
Uh,
for a lot of companies.
Sure. Shubham asks, Shubham has read your journey, which led him to know James Bach. Can you summarize and tell us the best lessons you have learned from James?
Oh well, okay. James has fired me a couple of times as well. I failed in this BBST exam, and Ken Kenner wrote to James Bach saying Pradeep wasted my time, and James Bach fired me in the sense that he stopped talking to me, and then I had to do a whole lot of things to get back and all of that stuff. So in terms of lessons learned from James, um, I think. I think it's about persistence. It's about deep thinking.
Mhm.
This man has is one of the best deep thinkers we have in the testing space, and also James equally went through about a phase of understanding people and all of that stuff. So there are some good takeaways in the way that he has adapted to how he has understood people, and I think some of the exercises that he has done with me, and he used me as a guinea pig for his rapid software testing online, and so all of those things were a great learning for me. So that's what I would say about James.
Cool. One last question for the session I will take
Yeah,
with
sure.
you, Pradeep. How QA teams can become respectable in any organization? How do we earn respect as a tester?
How do we earn respect as a tester? Okay, so in in every bad organization or in every good organization, there is somebody who cares about value. Finding that person who cares about value and understanding what value they care about
Mm-hmm.
and providing that value to them is the way to get respect. Now, I absolutely do know that whoever has asked the question, okay, also acknowledges that we need respect from people who value things. It's not from people who don't value things. Now, for people who don't value certain things, they would value working a lot of hours, not having a work life balance, and things like that. We don't want respect from such people. We want respect from people who are solving customers' problems. And in most of the organizations, uh, if your own lead or boss is not the person who is valuing things, it's important to find the person within the organization who cares and
Mm-hmm.
become a change agent. Now, today, if I go in, as a software tester in one of the projects, I would not be doing a single test, but first helping to build a culture where
Mm-hmm.
where testers and other team members can succeed. So
Mm-hmm.
so removing that obstacle, fixing the culture part, and talking to people who care about the culture of engineering, the culture of building product is what matters to build respect in any organization. Now, if the organization is plagued by a bad culture, then obviously it puts everybody knows what to do, and I don't even need to say that. But with that said, and as this is the last question, I want to express my gratitude to you, to the test tribe, to Mahesh, to the whole team, to the invisible host, Josely, and everybody else who has been supporting to make this happen. The Fail Conference is one of the best conferences of software testing that has been ever done. Because here we are repeatedly talking about failures, and I think for a lot of folks who don't have as much gray hair as me, they would be absolutely confident to come out and speak about their failures and be it an open, and you can take whatever what say Anuj said, 100% of it. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. I know there are a lot of other speakers also who are actually brilliant. So mix all of these things and build your failure resume. That would be the bottom line of this whole conference. Thank you very much.
Pradeep, thank you so much. You actually made it very easy for me to announce the next